Hey everyone, so welcome back to a new Korea video. I'm not gonna lie, I might have missed stalking Koreans and finding some new builds just a little bit. We have some pretty good ones in this one though, so let's just crack on with the video. First up, we're going to look at Varus, and this must be fate. I come back after a break, my favorite champion is back, and all we need now is AP Varus, right? And I have a feeling actually next patch we might be looking at it. So Varus is played more everywhere right now. He's actually got a really good win rate, which for Varus is insane. Like, normally you never have that. He's always below a 50% win rate, even when he's considered good. The change this time is it's Sniper, like Archer Varus, right? Umbral Glaive is really cheap. It gives you a decent amount of lethality, AD, cooldown reduction as well. But that means that you can get your next lethality piece sooner than before, and that's a really big part. It also lets you disable wards, which is amazing for bot lane, but you'll basically be hitting like a truck from a mile away. That is the entire point of the build, right? You max your Q out, you fire your arrows, and you do a ton of damage from really far away. It is just going lethality after that, Yumu's, Edge of Night, stuff like that. Just making your Q really hard, especially with W. It's such a good execute, and actually popping your blight stacks as well can be some insane burst. This is probably the most fun Varus build that you're going to get to play outside of AP, which is like pure burst, but it's also one that everybody hates playing against, so it likely won't be long before Riot adjust it. It's also the build that Koreans abuse the most in general anyway. They did it even when it wasn't super good, but Edge of Night now is just adding icing on the cake basically. You have a shield to cover his one big weakness, which is no mobility. You are going to be poke, you are going to be just firing your Qs out constantly for damage, but you have your ultimate, which is a really game-changing teamfight ultimate in general anyway, and that does set up the rest of your combo. So next up, we're going to look at a Blade and Black Cleaver build that you're probably going to see all over the place and might have started to see on champions like NOCTURNE, but especially on champions like SETT. So your passive auto attacks allow for very easy Blade procs anyway. It's 24% current health now, and your auto damage and everything else added on top of it. The idea is that it's pretty consistent damage over a fight rather than burst from like Trinity Force, and this all happened because melee damage on Blade was buffed to 12% from 8%, which is huge. So that's the first part, right? We kind of expected the Blade was going to be on these bruiser types anyway, but second item Cleaver plays into this even more. It's a very good item for SETT in general, but it's actually the armor shred that applies to the percentage damage from your blade, since that's physical damage as well. Cleaver actually increases the damage of your Blade the Ruined King, and that increases the healing from the blade as well, since you heal for the damage dealt from the percentage on top of it. You will see this Blade and Cleaver build pop up on a ton of different champions from now on because it's insane synergy, but both are really good on bruisers. The idea of Blade on SETT especially is that he's better in teamfights after he's blown his load. You won't really burst as hard when you dive in with the 1-2 combo punch, but after that you will actually have more consistent and you'll get through tanks as well. The only other thing as well is that you are getting attack speed sometimes instead of tenacity in your runes now, which lets you play more aggressive and allows for the extra blade procs, right? So it's all built in synergy. Last Stand and Serix actually has some really good synergy with SETT as well. Base your enemies into attacking you, getting you a bit low, then you have your massive shield from Serix and from your W and a ton of damage. We are going to stick with another bruiser, but we're going into the mid lane this time. So GAREN mid is actually really good. Even through the nerfs, GAREN is still shining. Nothing too crazy has changed, but he is basically just broken. This time around, they're swapping PD for Shiv second and then opting for Sterix a bit later into the game, which gives him way more burst, way more damage, and keeps up because you kind of need some damage from mid lane, right? You can get away with Shiv mid for more push and damage, but you only need your Trinity Force as your first item to start to kill people during the silence. So you flash on them, they get nuked, and it's kind of ridiculous. As stupid as it sounds, and it's pretty sad actually as well, like this is kind of our new breed of assassin. It's a very similar play pattern and damage as well, but it's coming from someone way tankier that you don't really expect and is way harder to bully out. Your W means you can basically outtrade anybody, even assassins, as long as you time it well. It's a stupid play pattern, but wave clear is nuts with your E. You take no damage and you get a lot of kills. The funny thing is in career as well, his win rate actually spikes to the highest it's going to be at 30 minutes, which is not normal for typically like an early to mid game champion. 30 minutes, by the way, is normally like 3 to 4 item point, which is kind of when most games are ending, and that's just ridiculous. His lowest is actually when he doesn't have any items with no complete, so he doesn't have Trinity Force, that's very early into the game, and then with each item he continues to power up even more, so he only needs 2 damage items, and then he gets tanky to survive after. So next up, we're going to go into MAOKAI. This is another typical top lane champion, but we're going to stick him as a support. He's been out of meta for a while, but now he's actually pretty good in every single lane. Even jungle, kind of, you can make it work, but support is doing really well. His early game is not the best, and that's putting it nicely. If you pair him with an aggressive AD carry, he can definitely get some kills diving in with his W, but after your Aftershock is gone, you're pretty doomed. His kit allows him to peel for his AD carry extremely well because of how tanky he is and how much he heals as well, so you're going to be safe. You can frontline, you've got your root, your knockback, your ultimate. It's so good. Once you've engaged with your ultimate, or maybe not engaged, but counter-engaged, used it, whatever, your Zeke's is going to kick in, and you're going to start slowing and burning the enemy team. It's actually a huge boost in damage for your AD carry, and you're going to last a long time with your stone play. The thing is, you can't really burst him down at the front either. Like Aftershock, the crowd control as well, but the harder you try to burst MAOKAI, the more often his passive is going to be up and healing from it as well. But you can't really ignore him because he will lock down your team. His objective control is actually really good as well as a support. You have his saplings, right? You line them up in bushes, and then that's going to slow the enemy team that come into the Dragon Pit or Baron Pit and give you a good start to a fight. If you combine that slow with your ultimate, it's a really good way to actually engage a fight, because otherwise you kind of like get it dodged most of the time. But also those sapling tricks as well can be used in the river to not get ganked early game. He's very tanky, he's got a lot of crowd control, really good peel frontline, and it's basically all you want from a tank support, plus an okay amount of damage as well. We're actually going to go back to mid lane again for a champion that also doesn't belong in the mid lane, but this time it's a jungler. So Nocturne has been played a bunch in Korea as a mid laner, but normally it's 40-30 and never that popular. What we're seeing now though is we're seeing Black Cleaver, Edge of Night, Guardian Angel. So technically all three of those items are kind of half offense and half defense items, so it shouldn't really work. So Cleaver first item has a lot of stats on it anyway: health, damage, CDR, armor shred. Phage passive is also really nice, and you have some really good synergy built in with Nocturne's kit. So that part is good, right? That's really good. And then Edge of Night second and Guardian Angel afterwards. But with the Edge of Night, the shield, you can't be crowd controlled when you dive in. And then you follow up with your W shield to block something else, and there is no way anyone can get away from you. Lethal Tempo also works perfectly, so we're still going to be taking this anyway. It's really good with this fear, usually kicking in shortly before the fear goes off for maximum damage output, while they can't really do anything about it because you have these spell shields. Funnily enough, actually, in Korea, his jungle win rate right now is pretty bad, and that's putting it nicely. The old Dustblade Nocturne just doesn't really work, but that's what you have to really do if you play a jungle. Nocturne mid works a lot like Talon instead. Gets the push with Tiamat early, gets the enemy mid laner killed a few times maybe if they move away from their tower, or roams and does it to other lanes. This kind of new build as well with Nocturne, half like offense, half defense, a little bit tanky but still able to kill you, is just really hard to deal with. I actually also think something that is part of this as well is that it's easier to play. It's not as glass cannon, it's not as punishing, and it doesn't fall off a cliff like Full Lethality does. So next up, we've got a few AD carries recently that have started playing Halo Blade. So Vayne is using this a little bit in Korea, but Kai'Sa is using it a ton. It's normally a very niche rune to run, but it works surprisingly well. I'm not actually sure if you can call it niche anymore, because it's almost 50% of players are using it now. It improves your early game a little bit by letting you stack your passive up on enemies really quickly and trying to play a bit more around like short burst trades, like ducking in and then ducking out. It's actually really good as well with your support, because I'll normally add like maybe 2 to 3 stacks of the passive, at least 1 to 2 normally, and then you can get the other ones for a passive proc really quickly after your Halo Blades. We are back to this build of Manamune, Rage Blade, more AP items afterwards, not really crit, and this increases damage throughout our kit obviously, but with an emphasis on popping your passive stacks. That's also where Halo Blade comes in a bit later. You get your passive faster, but also when you have your Mirror Mana transform, the very fast initial autos will also apply all the bonus damage. Presence of Mind is going to give you more mana for this, so more damage. You've got triple healing in the runes as well, lifesteal, ability healing from Ravenous, and even Taste of Blood. The one downside is it's less consistent damage than Pressy Attack, but it front loads your damage into a bit more bursty style instead of like after Pressy Attack is proc. AP is more burst in general, right? So this build kind of has some good synergy there. It's probably coming down to playstyle a little bit more, because these are very, very similar. They just do the same things in a different way. Remember as well, this is even more burst after using your E with the attack speed from that. You can pop out of your stealth once you have that and instantly nuke somebody back to champion select after Mirror Mana's transform because of those very quick first autos. So this one is a little bit similar to our set build that we already talked about, so I wanted to leave it until a bit later into the video, but Irelia hasn't really found a home in Season 10 so far. Couldn't really find the right build or place for her until now. Remember earlier Blade was buffed, right? So it's insanely good for melee champions now. No surprise it's good on Irelia. It was already good on her anyway because of the attack speed with her passive. This build is a bit different though. It's Blade the Rune King into Wit's End. It's a bit weird, but then you think that her Q applies on hit damage like Blade and like Wit's End, and it allows multiple procs on the same target with your Q resets. You actually get a lot of healing from this as well. You have your Blade, Wit's End, Conqueror, Bloodline. It's quite surprising actually. It lets us stay healthy and dive in and out of fights properly, but the damage almost turns to burst when you're applying it that often. After you've done that, after you stop diving around, if that's even a thing, and you run out of cooldowns, you have your passive and your Conqueror. The extra attack speed in this build is more about that damage over time at that point. You still chunk with the on-hit damage anyway, and even extra from your passive. The really good part about this build is with Trinity Force is a lot about the burst damage until a bit later, but this is really mixed. It means she can dart around teamfights, still do good chance of damage with her Q marks, but then it also means she can split better and destroy tanks. This weirdly has actually made her early game a little bit better as well, but she really still excels at 3+ items when she gets there because her first two are very squishy damage items, and then she gets some defense. Again as well, by the way, it is similar to SETT because we are using Cleaver for phase 3rd normally, and then the Blader and King synergy with that to increase the damage and the healing. Jungle is pretty stale in Korea, I'm not gonna lie. I came back, it's basically the same thing, but one thing I did notice was a different UDYR jungle build. He isn't a common champion over there or over here. Partly that's because of his weak teamfight potential anyway, which is really important at higher ranks, just a little bit hard to navigate and a little bit awkward. In Europe and North America, we play in burst, right? We play Warrior, Trinity Force, and we just try to kill people as quickly as possible, and it does work, like you disappear so fast. In Korea though, people have started to play in Blood Razor and Wit's End, or even Blood Razor and Trinity Force sometimes as well. Like the AD build is there a little bit, but a lot of it is attack speed. Blood Razor gives you a lot of attack speed for very easy passive procs, and you actually have some good synergy with your Q even though it's not feeding the AD ratio. You follow that by Wit's End for even more, and a fair amount of healing as well, but it is just such high damage. Tanky items like Sterix and Deadmans are really going to improve his team fight after that point, making him much harder to kill, so he can kind of jump from target to target and not just go for that one person isolated. But he is also another champion that can abuse Conqueror, just because it's so easy to get that stack with the attack speed, with your kit, and then that is even more healing on top. This build especially is also ridiculous objective control. You melt through dragons and barons, you can solo them very fast. I don't know about solo baron, but maybe before the enemy team even realize. Lost Up isn't really a new build, but one of the biggest things I noticed when I looked at Korea this patch is that Silas is dominating everywhere. His play rate has been on the rise for the past few weeks, and it's becoming really obvious why, because he's just basically more of a bruisery kind of champion now with very low cooldowns, a lot of healing, and diving around. It revolves around his W this time, mostly being maxed out first, which gives him insane bursts of healing, gets down to about 7-second rank 5, and then you're going to add in 30% cooldown reduction from your first two items, and suddenly wonder why you can't kill him. His build is very similar to what we're used to, Proto Belt for the gap closer and Ludens for the extra damage. Both together actually are really hard to deal with. Silas is going to peak mid to late game when you've got a few items online and you can start to use some of that AoE damage to take down an entire team. He honestly uses some champions' ultimates better than they do, which is pretty ridiculous, and there are a lot of really big ticket ones for him to steal in the meta at the moment. Hopefully you guys found a new build that you can test out. Let me know if it goes well. Thank you for watching till the very end of the video. And for now, I will leave you with the robots.